The Last Bell. Frank Smith of Greenwall. Frank Smith made his name not with weapons, not with armor, but with the bone and sinew of his fists. Born in the gutters near the brewery vats of Greenwall's rustic section, he'd grown up dodging elbows. In smoky bars, playing songs on borrowed lutes, and sleeping off hangovers beneath fish carts. By 16, he was fighting for drinks. By 18, for coin. By 20, for his name. He wasn't a knight, nor a soldier. Just a brawler with a taste for women, song, and the next rush of blood to the head. His or theirs. He'd fought dwarves with skulls like anvils. Highlanders with wrists like tree roots. Even 2 shield guards from Redclay, that entered the rustic section, looking to knock the dog from the street. They left missing teeth. But fame came with a price, and the final price came in the form of Maggot the Maul, an ogre of brutal repute, barely civilized enough to be let out of his chains. The venue was the Gold Chamber, Greenwall's famed subterranean fighting pit, an old wine cellar repurposed by the merchant class. The stone walls sweat from the packed heat of onlookers, their coin heavy in the hands of bookkeepers. No magic allowed. Only clerics for hire in the wings, paid in advance to mend what they could. Death was not uncommon. This wasn't a duel. It was a storm meeting a man. The fight, Gold Chamber, Greenwall rules, bare knuckle. No weapons. No armor. One victor. The other leaves on a board, or doesn't. Crowd, over 500, pressed shoulder to shoulder. Nobles watching from balconies. Peasants hanging from the rafters. Beer flowing like rain. And at the center, 2 combatants. One flesh, one legend. Round 1, the crack of thunder. Frank kept his feet light, bouncing, circling. Maggot was huge, nearly 8 feet tall, thick-necked, with a belly like a siege drum and arms knotted like tree trunks. His skin looked like rough clay, and his fists were big as stew pots. The ogre stepped forward, stomping with weight. Each blow he threw was a battering ram, meant to end the fight on impact. But Frank was faster. So much faster. He ducked under a haymaker, slipped a second, and darted inside. Pop. Pop. Crack. 3 quick jabs to the midsection, then a right cross to the mouth. Maggot flinched, but grinned. A molar fell from his grin, and he laughed, deep and low, like the start of an avalanche. Frank danced back, grinning too. The crowd roared. Round 2. The avalanche moves. Maggot came like a wall. Frank was nearly caught flat-footed as the ogre charged, fists swinging in heavy arcs that clipped air hard enough to whistle. One grazing blow scraped Frank's ribs. Pain. But he rolled with it, answered with a sharp elbow to the ogre's flank, then darted behind him. Maggot wheeled slower than Frank expected. The ogre wasn't just big, he was measured, smarter than Frank liked. Frank kept his jabs high, aiming for the temple and ear, peppering Maggot with shots that thudded like drum beats on old leather. He was scoring, but the beast wouldn't stop coming. Then, boom! A fist hit Frank's shoulder like a hammer dropped from a bell tower. He staggered, his arm going numb from the impact. But his footwork saved him. He slid left, tucked low, and bought himself distance as the bell rang. Frank's corner. He's laughing, lad, but so were the boars we used to spear in the woods, until we struck liver. He bleeds same as any. Round 3. The trap. Frank went on the offensive. Feints. A sharp hook. He was testing Maggot's reaction speed, and found it slower than most men. But the ogre had reach. That reach was like a damned halberd. Frank slipped in under a lazy swipe, jabbed twice to the gut, then a crunching right uppercut to the chin. The ogre reeled back a step, and that step lit the crowd ablaze. Then Maggot faked a stumble. Frank, trained to kill hesitation, lunged. Wrong move. The ogre pivoted and caught him with a brutal, short-range elbow to the cheekbone. It made a sound like a melon cracking. Frank dropped to one knee. Blood sprayed from his nose. His vision went white. The crowd fell silent. Frank forced himself upright before the ref could count. Wiped his face. nodded to the cleric, who kept his distance. His corner didn't yell. They knew the look in Frank's eyes. He wasn't out. Not yet. Round 4. Measured mayhem. Frank fought smarter. He slowed down, conserved his movement. The room was spinning, and his left eye was swelling shut. But he could still see the ogre's ribs rising faster now. Maggot was breathing harder, sweating down to his belt. Frank focused on the body. Jabs to the kidneys. Hooks to the gut. A hard stomp to the ogre's foot, and a rising strike to the liver. Maggot grunted, genuinely pained. Frank ducked a slow haymaker, and countered with a leaping knee to the midsection. Maggot coughed. He could hurt him. Maggot swung a backhand. Frank ducked, but it grazed him. Sent his ears ringing. Round 5, the bloody waltz. Frank saw it now. Every move had to be perfect. He opened the round with a shoulder roll, baited a low sweep, then punished with a right hook. It connected on the ogre's jaw. Maggot reeled. Frank pressed, ignoring the burn in his lungs. Left. Right. Left again. A brutal spinning elbow to the ogre's temple. Blood. The ogre bled from the brow. The gold chamber erupted. Frank threw one more body shot, then a second hook. Maggot caught him. The ogre, eyes wild, trapped Frank's wrist with one hand and slammed him into the ground. Once, twice, 3 times. The pit floor cracked with each impact. Frank went limp. The bell rang. Aftermath, the legend begins. Frank lay still. Clerics rushed in. It took 3 men to keep Maggot from continuing the fight. The ogre beat his chest and roared, but even he looked down at Frank with respect. Frank woke hours later on a wooden cot in a cleric's tent, ribs bound, nose crooked, one eye sealed shut. Tarn, his promoter, leaned close. "You lost." Frank smirked. "Did I now?" They never stripped his name from the banners. Months later, when people spoke of that night in the gold chamber, they didn't just speak of Maggot. They spoke of the man who bled him. The man who danced 5 rounds against an ogre and made him sweat. Frank Smith, the barroom hero of Greenwall. Chapter 2. The Long Circuit. Frank Smith was only 23, but in the taverns of Greenwall and the scattered lands beyond, he'd already passed into legend. After the brawl with Maggot the Mall in the gold chamber, Frank spent a full month under the care of clerics for hire, bones wrapped and reset, his breathing shallow, his food chewed for him. He had 3 cracked ribs, a shattered nose, a bruised lung, and still, he had almost won. The story spread fast. Frank Smith, bare-knuckled and mortal, made the ogre kneel. When he finally limped out of the healer's ward and back into the rustic section, he was greeted not with silence, but cheers. Bards penned verses. Barmaids begged for kisses. Even the city guard stood aside when he passed. But heroes need foes, and Frank had none. The empty arena. Promoters stopped calling. Fighters stopped showing. In the weeks following the Maggot bout, Frank offered double purses to anyone brave enough to step in the circle with him. No one did. They'd whisper it at the bar when they thought he couldn't hear. "He can't be beat, that one. Too fast. Too mean. Too blessed. He hit an ogre clean." Who'd want to follow that? It wasn't fear, exactly. It was avoidance. Why take a beating when you'd only be the man after Frank Smith? So Frank left Greenwall behind. The tour. He called it his long circuit. A season's journey through the lowland towns, hill villages, and border hamlets of western Yyth. In Wetland Forge, he fought 3 miners outside a brewery for laughs and coin. In Dustwood Hollow, he took on a farmhand twice his weight and dropped him in front of 200 witnesses. In Bluff Spring, he bedded the innkeeper's daughter after taking down her brother in a hayloft scuffle. Everywhere he went, there was wine, song, and at least one person bold enough to try him, but none who could truly test him. He'd become a spectacle, a living legend in boots and wraps. People didn't fight Frank to win. They fought him to say they'd fought him. And then, slowly, even that stopped. The loneliness of the unmatched. By early summer, no one wanted to step in the ring at all. Crowds still gathered when he passed. He was recognized, cheered, toasted. But no one dared challenge him. And that was worse than any injury. Frank found himself picking fights on the road, trying to bait highwaymen into brawls. Gambling drunk in road inns, just for the thrill of being insulted. It didn't help. Fame had dulled his edge more than any blow could. The arena was empty, and the fire inside him needed a place to burn. A new trade. He signed on as a sellsword and road sentry, protecting merchant caravans and clergy groups from petty raiders and forest wolves. The pay was basic, but the work came with motion, with distance, and occasionally, just occasionally, a fight. He kept to himself, spoke little, punched trees when the blood got too hot. By the end of the second month on patrol, he'd nearly forgotten the cheers, the rings, the blood-soaked canvas of the gold chamber. And that's when he met Jade Deathblade. First sighting. He arrived at dusk. Tall, wiry, dark of eye, and darker still of expression. Hair tied in a loose tail that hung over his shoulder like a whip. Cloak black as a crow's wing. His boots were scarred. His voice low and polite. "Name's Jade," he said to the sentry captain. Then, glancing at Frank, added, "Deathblade, when it matters." Frank scoffed. "You choose that name?" Jade just smiled without teeth. "Was given. I earned it. Same as you earned your story about the ogre." The two stared at each other for a long moment. A stillness passed between them. Not tension, not rivalry, recognition. The sort of weight fighters carry in their bones when they smell another who's seen the inside of a pit, a war, or worse. They didn't speak again that night. But Frank couldn't stop thinking about him. Marching together. In the following days, Frank learned that Jade never bragged, never asked questions, never offered more than what was needed. But he moved with precision. Killed a bandit with a thrown dagger before Frank could even raise his fists. He didn't move like a mercenary. He moved like someone trained, sharpened. The men muttered rumors by the campfire, came from the Black Cliffs. Was in the blade schools under the sand priests. Once killed a man without a sound. No mark, just dropped like he forgot how to live. Frank didn't buy half of it, but he respected all of it. And Jade. Jade watched him fight when the caravan was ambushed on the third week. Watched Frank take down 2 wolfmen barehanded and still have breath to shout orders. Afterward, when the dust cleared and blood soaked the grass, Jade finally spoke. "You're a dancer," he said. Frank blinked. "I'm a fighter. Dancers make better fighters," Jade replied. "They move for beauty and survival. The invitation." Later that evening, as the caravan settled near a ruined watchtower, Frank approached him. "You ever fight bare knuckle?" he asked. Jade's mouth twitched. "Long ago. Want a round? Just for fun?" Jade looked at him for a long time. Then, softly, "No crowd here. No coin." "I'm not asking for coin." "Then why ask?" Frank didn't answer right away. "Then, because I'm tired of being unchallenged." Jade studied him, then nodded once. "Tomorrow, at sunup, away from the camp." Chapter 3, The Black Ribbon Path. Dawn broke cold across the high road, a ribbon of slate stretching between forest and frost. Frank stood near a moss-crowned ruin, shirtless, fists wrapped, breath steaming in the still morning air. Across from him stood Jade Deathblade. He hadn't taken off his cloak. He hadn't stretched, just stood there like a statue carved from midnight, waiting. Frank cracked his knuckles. "You sure you don't want rules?" Jade tilted his head. "If you need them." Frank grinned. "Didn't say that." They circled. The earth below them was packed dirt and frost. Their boots slid slightly, their shadows long in the angled light. Then Jade moved, and Frank saw something he had never seen before. The style of shadows. Jade didn't fight. He flowed. He moved like smoke, folding through gaps in stone. One moment upright, the next coiled low, hands like knives and feet never still. Frank threw a quick jab, expecting to test him. Jade wasn't there. Frank turned too late, and found himself on one knee, his shoulder locked, and Jade's elbow pressing down with just enough pressure to warn, "This could break." "Fast," Frank muttered. "Not fast," Jade replied, letting him go. "Efficient." Frank rolled back to his feet. He charged. It didn't matter. Jade slipped under, grabbed his belt and knee, twisted, and dropped Frank with a sweep. Flat on his back. No breath. Jade crouched beside him. "You fight like a hammer," he said. "Strong. Direct. But predictable." Frank groaned. "You want to say that again when I'm standing up?" Jade stood and offered a hand. Frank took it. An offer made. They walked side by side afterward, bruised but grinning. Frank stretched his shoulder, wincing. Jade didn't even look winded. Frank glanced over. "You train under someone?" Jade shook his head. "A few. Took what worked, threw the rest. Ever teach?" "Not often." "Why now?" Jade paused at the crest of a hill. Below, their caravan camp stirred with morning cook fires. "You've got raw potential. The kind that doesn't last unless it's shaped," Jade said. "You've been winning on instinct and grit, but you're past that now. You want to survive the real fights, the ones where pride means nothing and death means everything. You need tactics, technique." "A sword?" Frank raised an eyebrow. "I'm a fist fighter." "Good," Jade said. "Means you'll respect the blade when it comes. You've already learned pain. That's half the lesson." Frank nodded slowly. Jade continued. "I'll train you. On one condition. Name it. You stop chasing cheers. Start chasing perfection." Frank looked down at his wrapped hands, calloused. "Blood-stained. Empty now." He nodded. "Yeah, I think I'm ready." Chapter 4. The Tempering. There was no crowd, no coin, no roaring cheer. Only sweat, steel, and silence. Frank Smith, the brawler of the rustic section, once a pit-born prince of broken noses, had changed. His fists still worked. But now they flowed like rivers around a blade. His body moved with balance, control. He was leaner, quicker, and harder to hit than he'd ever been. Gone was the lunging brute. In his place stood a fighter reborn in rhythm and precision. Finesse had taken to Frank like a second breath. The days were long. The nights longer. Under Jade Deathblade's discipline, Frank trained to match flow to purpose, movement to intent. A step wasn't just a step. It was a threat, a trap, a question. Every sword form had to be danced as much as struck. Frank learned to disarm with his eyes, to read muscle tension the way a gambler reads dice. He studied the arc of a thrown axe, the counterweight of daggers, the silent rotation of a wrist before a strike, weapons of the body, and beyond. Jade did not let him specialize. "You will learn all," he said. "Then, when the day comes, you'll know what to draw." Frank trained with a narrow dueling blade that kissed air and bit flesh, a crescent dagger meant to curve behind shields, a balanced throwing axe worn in the small of his back, his body used in tandem with steel to push, lock, or throw opponents off their axis. It wasn't muscle that won him favor with the blade. It was timing. Footwork. Breath. Patience. One day, after a sparring session that ended in Frank pinning Jade to the ground for the first time, the older man simply nodded. "Now," Jade said, "you're ready." The way of the 7 brothers. Jade led Frank not north, but east, across winding trails and forgotten passes, through whispering trees heavy with storm moss and frozen dew. They came at last to a ridged valley of stone pillars and runic altars, hidden from all but the worthy. There, 7 longhouses encircled a central ring of carved spears, the camp of the 7 brothers clan. Each brother wore the mark of a different god: Odin's wisdom, Thor's fury, Frey's abundance, Tyr's justice, Baldur's grace, Vidar's vengeance, and Loki's cunning. They were champions of the Norse pantheon, exiled by treaty to this sacred ground after their long war against the Crimson Pentacle. Here, they did not teach war for war's sake. They taught the path to Valhalla, to live as warriors of honor, to fight as if already dead, to die laughing with blade in hand. Frank was accepted as an outsider, but not a brother. That would take more. He rose with the sun, trained with the brothers, and broke fast on cold meat and hot bone broth. The training was brutal. Blows were not pulled. Mistakes drew blood. But every lash of pain carved him closer to the warrior he was becoming. In time, they showed him the ritual of readiness, sparring beneath a falling sheet of sleet, blade gripped tight, until one warrior fell to his knees. Frank fell many times. Then one day, he didn't. The steel that calls home. Jade brought him before the carved altar on the 7th day of the 7th cycle. Yours, Jade said, gifted from the old forge before the world turned south. You've earned it. Blue-gray, bare of markings, straight-edged, alive with balance. Steel not forged in Yyth, but hammered before the age of flame. A relic of the gods made for warriors, not kings. This is the last of its kind in this place, Jade said. It leaves Frostshire with you. There will be no other. Frank took the sword in both hands. It was light, but final, like being handed fate. The brothers stood in silence. One, the eldest, spoke. What you do with it will either shame us or redeem us. They did not forbid Frank from teaching others, but they made him swear, you must never speak of this place, not its name, not its path, not its purpose. He did not hesitate. He swore. It changed everything. Now, he was ready not just for battle, but for purpose. Now, his path led forward, toward glory, toward death, toward songs not yet sung, toward Valhalla. Departure and direction. By moonlight, Frank and Jade descended the trail. The cold bit their cloaks, but their pace was steady. I've taught you all I know, Jade said. Frank nodded. What now? Jade's eyes were hard in the dark. We return to the Principality. There's purpose waiting for us there. Frank touched the sword at his hip. He was ready to follow it. Chapter 5. The Road to Purpose. Frank and Jade walked the long road south, sun at their backs and boots worn from gravel, mud, and time. It was not war that shaped the land now, but commerce. Oxen carts, traveling performers, monks with their hands tucked into rope belts, all winding the same trade arteries that led toward the Principality. They passed Yyth men posted at the road's stone arches and wooden choke points. These toll-keepers wore patchwork uniforms, rusted mail over quilted coats, and the look of men not eager for glory. Most held spears, though some bore ledgers thicker than swords. We don't want trouble, one said, leaning forward with tired eyes as Frank approached. Pay your due, and you pass. Jade handed over a silver coin without a word. The Yyth man bit the edge, nodded, and stepped aside. Others followed suit. These were not zealous warriors. They were functionaries of the post-war roadways, guards who knew that peace bought with coin was sturdier than that earned by blood. For nearly 3 weeks, their journey was uneventful, the quiet interrupted only by river crossings, distant flute music, and the yapping of merchant dogs. Frank trained each night in silence, testing his flow and timing with forms Jade had taught him. Dagger drills, sword feints, how to step like water around a larger foe. The rare steel he carried at his hip was still nameless. He didn't feel ready to speak it aloud. By the 23rd day, they reached a familiar sight, Greenwall. The timber barricades of Frank's old haunt rose from the hillside, faded with rain and time but still standing. Frank narrowed his eyes. This place feels smaller than it used to. Jade gave no reply, only adjusted the dark scarf over his shoulder. They entered through the west gate under no fanfare. Just another pair of swords on the road. But not for long. Chapter 6. Old haunts, new shadows. The rustic section of Greenwall hadn't changed much. Mud clung to the boots like a lover who wouldn't let go. Roof tiles sagged like old men, The gutters stank of urine and clove oil, and the taverns still spilled their drunkards into the street like clockwork. Frank knew the path blindfolded, left past the smokehouse, 2 doors from the barrel maker's wife, and through the crooked alley. That led to the staggered boar, his first arena, his first victory, and his first scar. They didn't go there. Instead, they found lodging at a half-sunken inn called the Lantern Post, where the barkeep didn't recognize Frank, and the stew tasted of bone and barley. It suited them fine. By the second day, the word had spread. Frank Smith was back. Some remembered the bare-knuckled lad who knocked out the blacksmith's cousin with a single strike. Others whispered of the ogre fight, of how he nearly won, of how he walked away breathing. That was enough to restore legend. But Frank wasn't chasing legend anymore. The long road, the weeks with Jade, the training, the mountain, they'd changed him. Where once he fought for fame, he now sought purpose. Not coin for its shine, but for its use. Not applause, but advantage. Still, old habits die slow. Frank couldn't resist the women. He never could. Their laughter, their eyes, their challenge. He didn't chase them for trophies. He chased them because he loved being wanted. That got him in trouble. One night, a red-haired girl named Lyra took his hand in a dice hall. She kissed him bold, like she owned the moment. But Lyra belonged to Guildmaster Beric, a cloth baron with half the city under his purse. By morning, there were whispers. By evening, there were men. Jade stood watching from rooftops as usual. He said little. He listened more. And when he finally spoke, it was only this: we didn't come to drown in the shallow end. We came to build something deep. So Frank posted a challenge at the Gold Chamber, a formal notice with seal and terms. Not just for brawlers, but for guards, guilds, warbands. A display of skill open to those with coin to wager and honor to risk. The crowd gathered in days. The fights resumed, and the legend sharpened. But the ladies, and Lyra in particular, left shadowed trails in Frank's wake. No one bested him in the ring. But outside the pit, enemies were watching. Jade began speaking with merchants who wore foreign pins. Frank noticed men in cloaks with no dust on their boots. Rumors of the principality's silent wars crept through the tavern talk. Something was coming, and Frank could feel the road turning beneath him again. Chapter 7. The Armor of Purpose. The principality lay sprawled beneath an endless sky, fortified walls of pale stone, watchtowers, crowned with fluttering banners, and streets that hummed with purpose beyond mere survival. Frank and Jade entered through the southern gate, their steps steady but minds alert. The city was a place of politics and power, where coin whispered louder than swords, and faith shaped fate as much as steel. Sir John Fildam. They found Sir John waiting in the courtyard of the Order of the Silver Palm, a warrior whose reputation preceded him like a storm. Left-handed, lean but strong, and weathered by decades of paladin discipline, Sir John moved with the grace of a dancer and the quiet authority of a judge. "Frank Smith?" he said, voice low but carrying weight. "I've heard tales of your bare-knuckle fire, and your blade's newfound whisper." Frank nodded. "I fight for purpose now, not glory." Sir John's eyes gleamed. "Then you will need more than fists and blades." Gift. Within the armory, Sir John revealed a suit of armor forged not for heavy knights, but for agile fighters like Frank. Lightweight plates layered over supple leather, crafted to move with the body's flow, not fight against it. Gauntlets shaped for bare hands and quick strikes, boots built for silence and spring. "This armor," Sir John said, fitting Frank's shoulders with the pauldrons, "was made for a left-handed fighter like myself. It favors agility and finesse over brute strength." Frank flexed his arms, feeling the weight. "And freedom. Wear this," Sir John said, "and remember that protection is not just steel. It is discipline, timing, and knowing when to yield. A paladin's path." Sir John shared stories of his youth, of oaths taken beneath starlit skies, of battles fought for justice rather than coin. "Being a paladin is a way of life," he said. "It shapes your choices, your battles, your very soul. Frank listened, the idea settling like a seed in his heart. He was no paladin, not yet. But the road ahead was long. And now, he was better equipped for the journey. Chapter 8. Oaths and Secrets. The great castle of the principality stood like a fortress carved from stone and memory, looming over the town with battlements sharpened by centuries of siege and survival. Its thick walls held not only the kingdom's wealth and power, but whispers too delicate and dangerous to reach the common streets. Within those walls, beneath arches draped with banners faded by sunlight and candle smoke, the air was thick with tension. It was the kind of tension that could be cut with a blade, or unravel an entire kingdom, a debt of honor fulfilled. Frank stood in the armory, adjusting the leather straps of his new armor. The plates were surprisingly light, shaped not for the lumbering heaviness of a knight, but for the swift, precise movements of a seasoned fighter. Each piece felt like a promise forged in steel and sweat. Sir John Fildham watched quietly. His face, worn by years of battle and faith, carried the weight of unspoken truths. "This armor," Sir John began, voice low and steady, "is more than a gift. It is a repayment of an oath." Frank looked up, surprised. "An oath?" Sir John nodded. "Many years ago, in a skirmish on the border, Jade saved my life. His honor bound me to repay that debt when the opportunity came. Training you, outfitting you, this is my way of fulfilling that promise." Frank's grip tightened around the sword's hilt as the weight of that history settled beside the weight of the armor. That evening, Frank found himself among the muted elegance of the castle's great hall. Torches flickered along the walls, throwing light and shadow in equal measure, while voices mingled with the clink of goblets and the soft scrape of lutes. It was here that Frank met Yanela, a lady-in-wait without a queen. She was young, with a thoughtful expression framed by dark curls and eyes that seemed to hold secrets just beneath the surface. Unlike the courtiers who flaunted their titles, Yanela moved with quiet purpose. Her steps deliberate, her presence almost unnoticed unless she wished otherwise. They first spoke in the gardens, where night air mingled with the scent of jasmine and wet stone. "You've come far, Frank Smith," she said softly, her gaze steady. "And I've seen more than I expected," Frank replied. "The principality is not the peaceful place I imagined." Yanela smiled faintly. "Peace here is a fragile mask. Beneath it, the court is a web of alliances, secrets, and ambitions. And now, a shadow falls upon the king." Yanela's voice lowered, weaving a tale of worry. "The king's sickness is unlike any known ailment. No cleric, no healer, no whispered prayer has found cure or relief. His flesh weakens, but his mind remains sharp. A cruel fate that frustrates those sworn to protect him." Frank frowned. "Has no one uncovered the cause?" "None who dare speak openly," Yanela replied. "Rumors drift through the halls. Poison, curses, even betrayal within the castle itself. But all who voice suspicion are watched carefully, and silence is bought with gold or threats." She glanced around, ensuring no one listened. "The king's physicians are baffled. Some say the illness is a curse from the gods. Others whisper of dark magic. But the truth, if there is one, has been buried beneath layers of deception. Worse," Yanela continued, "there are those who move like shadows within the court. Spies who wear loyalty like masks and trade secrets like coin. The king's enemies may be as close as the next chamber, and his allies not all they seem." Frank felt a chill creeping beneath his skin, a growing unease. The battle he had trained for was no longer one of muscle and steel alone. "This is no simple illness," he said. "It is a threat to the entire realm." Yanela nodded gravely. "And the path to uncover it will be perilous. Friends may prove false, and enemies will hide in plain sight." As they walked the shadowed corridors, Yanela revealed more of the fragile state of the principality. The king's failing health had already stirred unrest among nobles and merchants alike. Trade routes once secure had seen more bandit raids, old alliances frayed. Whispers of rebellion stirred in taverns and market squares. "Without a strong king," Yanela said, "the principality will fracture." The old families will vie for power, and the streets will run red with ambition and blood. Frank looked toward the distant throne room, its heavy doors closed to all but the closest confidants. I'm no noble, Frank admitted, but I'm here now. If this kingdom falls, there won't be anywhere left to fight for. Yanella's eyes softened. Then you understand why the truth must be found. And soon. The weight of purpose. That night, as Frank lay in the sparse quarters granted him, he felt the weight of new responsibility settle deep. The lessons from Jade and Sir John had prepared him for combat, for survival. But this was a contest of secrets and shadows, where a misstep could mean death not by sword, but by betrayal. He thought of the rare steel sword resting by his side, its cold promise humming faintly. The road ahead was no longer just about glory or coin. It was about a kingdom's fate. And Frank Smith was now a part of it.